Good morning, everyone. Is everybody hear me okay? Excellent. It's great to see you all this morning. My name is Ramona Bartos, and I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer here in North Carolina. These are all my colleagues scattered around the room as well. And we just want to give you a very hearty welcome. It's so wonderful to see you all, and I want to very much apologize because there's a lot of warmth in the room, and it's not just coming from us. So I think things will get better as the day progresses. They've been doing some work down in our basement to improve our temperatures here. So I hope you'll bear with us and not be scared away by the way we're starting out this morning. But in any case, I just want to thank all of my colleagues for putting this all together this morning, along with our colleagues also from NCDOT. And I think you'll find the agenda to be very robust this morning. And I'll be back a little later in the morning. But again, I just want to welcome you all, whether you've come from just nearby or far away. We're really glad to have you here this morning. So a welcome to Raleigh. Chris?
Renee, did you want to? Hey, good morning, everyone. I know some of you don't know others, but I'm Chris Southerly. I am your state archaeologist at this point. I've been doing archaeology for about a little over 30 years, pre-contact, historic, maritime, and almost 25 with OSA. Included CRM work, from shovel bumming to principal investigator, teaching adjunct, other and of course regulatory compliance with the state. We're going to get into a lot of the details today on compliance, how we all go about getting archaeology done and doing the historic preservation and all of the nuts and bolts. So I thought just before we get into all the meat of things and the details, I just wanted to take a moment and step back and look at the bigger picture of why we're all here. Not what we do, but why we do it. Why did we choose to become archaeologists? Or, I focus on archaeologists because I'm an archaeologist, but our architectural historians, our restoration and preservation specialists that are here as well. Why did we choose to do what we do? Whether it's contract work, regulatory work, academic work, all have their individual goals and purposes. But we do collectively have an overall mission that we fulfill that is the same. And that mission, and we've been talking about it a lot here at DNCR recently, our mission truly is stewardship of our shared cultural heritage, period. And in doing that, we want to educate both others and ourselves. And we do this to enrich people's lives. We're not writing these reports. We're not doing this archaeology for your report to sit in our library and being forgotten. We're doing this to expand on the story, to tell the story to the people. And who doesn't love a good story about the past? And so we can help teach, fill in the gaps of history where it's missing, and record and tell our stories. So, and the fact that we might get to make a little money and doing something that we love along the way, that's just an added benefit. So I just wanted to kind of put an overarching thought that is going to underlie everything today. And now we'll get to the nuts and bolts. Renee has been our guide, mentor, and dare I say keeper? To keep us honest for a long time with our HPO process.
Katie says I'm the benevolent overlord.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, if you couldn't hear Renee, it's like Renee said Katie referred to her as the benevolent overlord. So I will step away here and let Renee start the show. As Lon mentioned earlier, I don't know if anybody's done the safety briefings. I'm also a dive safety officer, so that's in the back of my head too. Exits behind you the way you came in, exits also to the side, and restrooms are to either side, men's, women's, refreshments out front. It is warm in here, as Ramona said. Please be aware of that. There are some fans. I think they've already all been handed out, but don't hesitate to leave and cool off. You know, it's bad enough that we get to work out in the heat and the sun. Don't overheat in here while you're sitting and resting. All right, thanks. Renee?
Thanks, Chris. Well, I wasn't planning on making a speech. I was planning on doing introductions because I am the benevolent overward and that's my job. Thank you for coming. We're very glad you're here. We have not had an environmental review workshop in several years, and things have changed, as we all know. And so today we want to catch you up on where we are. We do appreciate the work you do, even though sometimes you don't always get back the comments that you wished you did. I want to introduce the folks who are on the podium today, the stage today. And then that way you'll be ready for their sessions. First, I've got James Stevens, James Tiberius Stevens. Does that tell you something? James is our environmental review assistant. He's also the person who is putting our records into order, an order that we've never seen before. He'll report a little bit on his digitizing work and how to make things available to you on the web from the State Historic Preservation Office. Next to him is Lung Cao. He is our environmental review specialist. He's funded by the North Carolina Department of Transportation. Thank you, Department of Transportation. And that is his main part. He works in particular with projects that are not simply FHWA, but with the Federal Transit, Federal Railroad, and the Federal Aviation Administration. He's actually working with the Federal Aviation Administration on the use of drones, and he's working on that with them nationwide. Next to him is Devin Bogart, our newest archaeologist. Let's give her a round of applause. She finished up. She is not the newest archaeologist, but she's finished up. She's graduated, and as a result of that, she's probably going to be looking for jobs that will let her move on from being the environmental review processor. But she is the person right now who has transitioned us from our old Access database to our new Laserfish. And if you ever want to hear any swearing and cussing, just come around our offices every now and then and you will hear it, because it has been problematic and frustrating. But we're doing our best to make it work and to make it work for y'all as well. Then we have Kim Urban. Kim is an archaeologist with the Office of State Archaeology. You probably all know that, and you may not know that she is now going to be moving over to the Department of Transportation. Boo, piss. But they're getting a really good person. And next to them is Dylan Clark, Deputy State Archaeologist, and he's also the supervisor out in the Western Office for the archaeologists there. Katie, where are you? Katie Harville, she is Environmental Review Specialist with the State Historic Preservation Office. She's been a blessing, and sadly, she is going, starting Monday, to the Department of Transportation as well. So we're going to miss her, but she will be over there, and as a result of that, I figure that the Department of Transportation owes us really big, as they do for Kim Urban. And let's see.
DOT's buying lunch.
What was that?
DOT's buying lunch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good point.
Just kidding.
Got Katie. Andy. And Andy Edmonds. We want to stand up, raise your hand. They can't see you, but they can. He is our GIS coordinator. And he is the person who makes your life so much easier as a result of having HPO web on the web. And then Rebecca. Rebecca's actually part of our Survey and National Register branch. And she works with Sarah Woodard's group. And let's see, one more person. Grace, where are you? Grace may be out in the lobby. Grace is our assistant, environmental review assistant, who is helping us move into the modern world as well. Okay, I think that's it, and my time is pretty much up, so let's move right into the next session. Okay?
It's one of the challenges of being tall. Good morning, everyone. Like Renee said, my name is James Stevens. I was just hired last year as an environmental review assistant, and I'm also the de facto archivist for my team. So I'm the baby of the team. I'm only 31, so young. But my position is unique because it was created in 2018 with funding from the Department of Transportation to not only help assist the environmental review team with processing incoming reports, but also to make all prior reports accessible. And when I started last year, about 75% of the reports were already digitized. However, there were quite a few of them, well, few is an understatement, that had no digital copies available. And that baton was passed to me last year, like I said. So I counted every single report that's in our collection, and we have over 1,400 historic structure survey reports in the library total. And out of those 1,400 reports, 320 of them had no digital copy available. And out of those 320 that needed digitization, it got more complicated from there because only 220 of them, only to understand as well, that just needed simple scanning, then connected to the environmental review or the State Historic Preservation Office website. But out of that 220, well, out of the 320, 60 of them had missing components. And the most important component of that was the determination of eligibility letters. That's letters we send out that show whether we concur or not with the report's findings. We could digitize them and put them online without the letters, but putting them online without the letters is like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without peanut butter. Still tasty, but it just isn't the same. But it got more complicated from there because there were 40 reports that were missing entirely, like the Roanoke Colony, just vanished without a trace. But the reason why I'm so passionate about this project that I've been doing for the past year is because, like Chris Sudley said, these reports aren't just analytical data. They showcase the cultural heritage of our state. It's an historical record, and I think the records that you submit to us deserve to be preserved and be shown off for the public. There were many challenges to this process. It wasn't just copy, paste, put online. There were a lot of hoops that we had to jump through in order to make these accessible online. The first problem was we had to screen every record for confidential data, whether it be for archaeology or any requests from tribal historic preservation offices. We had to make sure that nothing was leaked online. As one example, there was a modernizing US 19 project near Bryson City, and one report had extensive information on Kentua in Swain County, which is the mother town of the Cherokee people. Based on a request from the Tribal Historic Preservation Office, pin, location information, and maps had to be redacted before that report could be published online. There was also varying records retention policies. We had to race against the clock in order to find those missing reports or reports of missing letters. For example, in the Department of Transportation, they have an extensive record of all prior projects that have occurred under their watch. The Federal Highway Administration, they have a more strict records retention policy, meaning any record that isn't considered active is disposed of every few decades or so. So trying to race against the clock to find those records has been a challenge. There's also convoluted organization of prior reports. After a few years or so, copies of reports or they were, sent to the record center right behind us. And when they were sent to the record center behind us, though that type of organization has varied. So for example, if there was someone who submitted records to the record center, it would say, well, these are records from 1990 to 2000 for the Department of Transportation. And then when another batch gets sent in, it's, oh, here's records from 1986 to 1993, Department of Transportation. So trying to jump through hoops to trying to find the exact copy, it's been quite difficult, but also rewarding. There's also different procedures for each kind of record. For a lot of records, especially ones from the 90s, which I know is ancient history for most of us, those records have hand-drawn maps, photographs that have been glued directly onto the record. And also, there's a lot of records that were bound because I guess some consultants wanted to be fancy. So trying to capture those images and put them online, we have to use a variety of tools like a large format scanner or a Zootral scanner. That's a scanner where you open the Burke and you have a camera come down and scan each and every page. It's like, it looks like WALL-E. It's incredible to see. But those scanners take forever to try to capture those images. On the one hand, the images are quite high quality, but it also takes time. There's also miscellaneous older reports that just weren't in the library at all. As an example, Beth, who is one of our wonderful staff members from Survey, she requested information for the dogwood in Rutherford County. She saw on the HPO web that there was a determination of eligibility report that was submitted in 1994. However, no digital copy existed, and there was no record of it in our library. And so after a lot of digging, we eventually did find it in the record center, but it was underneath a bunch of different ER tracking numbers, which is a tracking number that we use to keep track of projects. Back in the 90s, they would submit different ER numbers for every phase of a project. Now we just combine it to one ER number, thankfully. Makes my job so much easier. But this is the result of our project throughout the past year. We originally had 320 reports that were not digitized. Now we only have about 44 remaining. And out of the missing, or the reports that had missing determination of eligibility letters, that has been reduced from 60 to 26. And for the number of missing reports, that have been reduced from 40 to 18. Now, we did scan and digitize the leftover 26 reports that were missing determination of eligibility letters, but we haven't put it online just yet because we're still holding hope that the letters out there somewhere, like peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But I look forward to having this completely digitized for you to access. So out of the 1,400 reports in our library total, 1,382 have been fully digitized. And with that said, oh, thank you. And with that said, I'll turn the time over to Devin to talk about Laserfish.
Hey, y'all. So we have moved to a new system from an Access database that was eventually going to not work anymore once we hit a certain data load. So just wanted to go over what the system was like and everything like that. A year after I started this position, which I started temporarily, we began the transition from a Microsoft Access database to a spreadsheet-based notification system to a dynamic database. When I did start, we were literally passing around pieces of paper for folks to sign off on to get ER projects moved through the system. And thank goodness we've moved on from that, and COVID forced us to move on from it. So our office ended up landing on Laserfish, a program administered through MCCI. Overall, the process from start to finish took 3 years, and we developed the scope of work, led the team on developing the database, and implemented all of the changes we needed to do. We are still cleaning up our data to this day, unfortunately. Yeah, so we've been doing all of this work while also making sure environmental review projects still happen, reviews still get done, and it's just been a mountain of a task. So the pros, though, are that every reviewer now has a task list with deadlines and due dates, and we can assign priority levels to those tasks. So that makes things a lot easier. I will say we are only assigning high priority, urgent priority to Hurricane Helene projects. We will try to assign any higher priority to a lot of projects, but we cannot make guarantees because we just unfortunately have too much work to make those guarantees. And the cons are, it's just not much easier compared to the Access database to relocate projects or information, and compiling any reports or data take just as long as before. We're still working on that. Hopefully we can fix it. And I did just want to go through the project workflow a little bit and how projects move through our system to kind of clarify some things. I know a lot of folks, sometimes in their emails, it seems like they think that I do all of the review or that Renee Gledhill literally does all of the review, and that is not true at all. We have a crew of 7 archaeologists and 2 survey reviewers that do most of the workload. 3 survey reviewers, I apologize, because Renee does do review, just not every single project. So we have a review request submitted. My team, who I am lucky enough to have 2 temps working with me right now, Grace Roper, who you met, and KDS, who cannot be here today, that upload all of the data to Laserfish. And then the project is assigned to our survey crew for review and our archaeology processors for review to reassign the project to archaeological review staff. So archaeology processors can also stop the project in the process if there is something wrong with the submission paperwork. We try to catch it at the beginning, but sometimes we don't always catch every bit of missing information that archaeology needs. Then survey and archaeology concurrently review the project. And then if archaeology or survey has comments, they're sent to Renee for approval. And then the letter is sent back to the applicant at the end. All right, and I'm going to turn it on over to Lun.
Hello. So this part is where we kind of start going over about how submitting projects to us goes. And usually the first thing you need to look at is HPO Web. And, you know, when you load up HPO Web, there's a lot of colors, there's a lot of shapes, and there's a lot of information. But in general, it's the first place you need to check to know what the heck is in your project area or next to your project area. So I'm going to do my best to try to, you know, summarize what are the properties you really need to be concerned about and kind of the stuff that you need to bring to us for review. But for the basics, you know, we have HPO Web, we have a GIS map that you could easily access. And if you're a little bit more savvy, the data is available to download and it is updated quite frequently. But more importantly, we do have a glossary on what all these property types are. So that's kind of housed under our Survey National Register branch. But you can see here, the legend here pretty much summarizing, you know, what each property type is, and then there's a drop down just briefly explaining everything. But more importantly, HPO Web does not have archaeological sites. That is protected under federal and state laws. You need to be SOL qualified or other qualifications, and you have to go through OSA. And we will discuss a little bit later down the line about the process of doing that and access. So as noted, HPO Web shows recorded properties, but not all recorded properties are historic properties as defined by 36 CFR 800, yada, yada. The most basic thing you need to know is that if it has a survey site number, we have a file on it. It doesn't mean that it has been evaluated. It could be literally a folder with a newspaper clipping in it, or it could be a fully comprehensive evaluation. It could have the National Register nomination form. It really depends. But the most important thing is that everything that is screened through the ER process doesn't automatically get a number, which is why it's really important that you do consult with us so we can let you know if there's any other properties of concern. So at default, if it has a survey site number, we have a file on it. And usually that means that the property is over 50 years old, so that needs to be reported to us during the ER process. And of course, importantly, if a property is gone, you don't need to worry about it. There's a little black dot on it. Ignore it. Good to go. But yeah, so the most prevalent one is what I learned recently is tan and not orange. And I think very quickly a lot of us learned that we might be slightly colorblind. But surveyed only, again, it just means that we have some sort of file on it. Usually they are the result of large surveys where maybe they might not be eligible. So they create a file, it's probably not eligible. The most important thing is to click on the little icon and check the notes. For example, we have one here, the CISC house, where we do have a determination where it is ineligible, and we do have the environmental tracking number that references when we made that determination. This is when you need to start being concerned about properties, are the ones that are orange, actually orange, not tan, or reddish orange, I don't know, pick a color, is DOE properties and study listed properties. So DOE properties have been properly determined eligible and reviewed by our Survey National Register staff. And they're usually produced during the ER or surveying process. Study listing is a whole other thing that is done through our Survey National Register branch that is not a part of ER, but for Section 106 purposes, we do treat it as a historic property. That being said, again, click the icon, check the notes, because sometimes in the notes it'll mention that it is gone or it has been evaluated or is ineligible. Just always check the notes for these properties. But yeah, study listed, it goes through our administrative code. That's a whole other separate process, but it's our internal process to kind of determine if properties are potentially eligible and kind of get them prepped and ready for the National Register Advisory Committee to kind of vote on to see if it is worth kind of pushing forward for National Register listing. But for the most part, for ER, things kind of stop at determination of eligibility. And then, of course, National Register properties, that's a whole other thing that has gone fully through the committee as a full National Register nomination form. It gets forwarded to the keeper. These projects are eligible for grants and tax credits. That's a whole other thing with our restoration branch and CLGs and so on and so forth. But one of the things that has confused a lot of people is sometimes you get a weird tanned surveyed only property in a National Register. That doesn't mean that it's not eligible. It's probably a contributing resource, but you should look at the full historic district survey inventory to see if a property actually is contributing or not. But at the very least, there's a dot, it has a file, check the notes. And then locally listing, purple. That's also a whole other process. So those are landmark properties by certified local government programs. Sometimes these locally listed properties are also determined eligible or National Register listed, and we'll take care of it on both sides. But when a property is locally listed only, a part of our ER process, we will generally defer to the local Historic Preservation Commission on what they may or may not want to be done for that property and what is appropriate for it. So you may have seen stuff like certificate of appropriateness. This is when stuff like this pops up. And then I'm going to pass it back to Devin to get into the nitty gritty about submissions and review.
All right. One thing that we do have in North Carolina is that things are done a little bit differently compared to Section 106 in other states. So we just wanted to go over that really quickly. So projects may be submitted in North Carolina in anticipation of Section 106 compliance, otherwise known as due diligence. It is really helpful if you divine that a project you're submitting is in fact due diligence. Anyone can initiate project review. SOI qualified individuals are not required. And background research for archaeological sites is not required for initial project review. That's why we have so many wonderful archaeologists on staff. HPO and OSA screens the project area and determines if a historic structure survey or an archaeological survey is required. And assessments of effects are not required unless you're a federal agency. And state-funded projects are reviewed under GS 12112A and only need to consider effects on already listed National Register of Historic Places properties. For environmental review, just a quick overview, be sure to check out our project checklist on our website. We update it fairly often as new developments occur. That is the link to our overall website, and you can find your way to environmental review. I did not want to put the whole link. It was going to be way too long. We don't believe anything is optional with our checklist. If it's on the checklist, it's on there for a reason. It's to help guide you into your submissions. And we'll turn around projects if we don't have what we have requested. And I'll discuss more of that in this presentation. All projects should be submitted to the environmental review email inbox. If you submit to reviewers, Renee Gledhill-Early, Ramona Bartos, or Dr. Darren Waters, it will cause delays because they have to route it around to me. They have to ask questions. Now we have 10 people on an email, and it is a living nightmare for me every single day. We outline the submittal process in our checklist and all of our letters, so it is very clear. And I have also posted the, if we do receive hard copy projects through the regular mail or FedEx, UPS, or courier, please follow those instructions too. If you, again, send it to Ramona Bartos, Dr. Darren Waters, your package will bounce around. And it takes even longer for us to get it, and we don't start the clock until we physically receive that project. It does not matter what is on your cover letter, what date is on your cover letter. And these are the reasons why submissions are rejected before review begins, like the top 5 reasons. Poor maps are just completely missing, or the maps don't show the APA in conjunction with the parcel data. That is very much preferred. Not providing the project acreage, OSA needs that for their annual reporting. Not providing applicant contact information. We want to make sure that everybody is in the loop on what we have determined as the effects, not what consultants would like for the effects to be. No offense, y'all. And listing the potential funding, permitting, whether it's state, federal, or if the project is due diligence. And then finally, missing deliverables for historic structure survey reports or archaeological survey reports. Those specifics will be covered in section 3, but often we have to turn things around for that. And finally, how to interpret SHPO letters. What does the no comment letter language mean? It means that we are accounting for archaeological and architectural resources when we say we have conducted a review of the project and are aware of no historic resources which would be affected by the project. If the historic property or recorded property is within the APE or adjacent, the project will have a no effect on them, and we will let y'all know in that letter. And the request for information, survey request, evaluations, no adverse effects will never have no comment. We will have specific language for all of the bits and bobs. So some section 106 odds and ends. We have updated our cell tower forms. So we have 2 different cell tower forms. One is the standard communications tower information form, and the other is the small cell batch form. The communications tower information form is for new towers, co-locations, single small poles. We do not require the FCC 620, 621 forms. You do not need to identify archaeological sites on the form, and we would actually prefer if you just never dug a hole in the ground when you're doing a cell tower survey. It causes a lot of delays to your project because then folks need to submit their reports through the OSA share file. We do not accept courtesy reports when it comes to cell towers. It lengthens the project substantially because the survey reports also have to meet OSA guidelines. The small cell batch form is helpful for, if you have a bunch of small cell poles within a 1 square mile radius, you can just put that all on that one form, and we can review it as one project. Bing, bang, you're done. And I've also included the forms link. You all will get these slides in a couple of weeks when we release the presentation out to the greater public. Do you want to take it? Yeah. And Len's going to take over for solar farms.
Yeah, so section 106 odds and ends, there are some things that kind of complicate the overall 106 process, but one of the biggest things we've been dealing with are solar farms. Solar farms are prolific in our state, but one thing that we definitely need to clarify is that when the project initially comes through to us, through the State Clearinghouse, through the State Utilities Commission, the only permits that are identified are FERC Form 556 and then a bunch of other state permits. We've gotten emails and stuff from lawyers, and we have consulted with the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and it has been clarified that FERC Form 556 is not an undertaking. It is a self-certifying form. FERC doesn't actually take a discretionary action, and therefore, unless someone is submitting the project to us saying they're doing it for Section 106 due diligence, it will be reviewed under GS 12112A as a state undertaking. That being said, solar farms are quite large, and they do eventually come back to us, usually with an Army Corps permit. And usually when they do, the APE is significantly smaller than what is the entire solar farm footprint. Now, we do understand that some clients would prefer you just to clear the entire project area, but make sure that that's what they want. And please note it when you do submit it to us that you're doing that kind of due diligence. But that does that does open up the door to consult with OSA, get you a survey plan that will be up to compliance. And of course, you'll get comments from us from survey if you want it, if there are any properties that need further evaluation. But as it is with the HPO web, check if there's any properties within that APE. If there are any buildings over 50, take photos of it and so on and so forth. So we have something to review. But again, unless you specify to us or unless Army Corps is triggered, it is a state undertaking, and we will use the state review letter template for that. CLGs and HPCs. So I did talk about this briefly with local designations. As you can see, it could get a little wonky. Sometimes the National Register boundary is one-to-one to the local, and sometimes it's not. But that's why it's important to check HPO web to see if your project is overlapping. But in general, if there's if your project area like a rehab or street design or sidewalk, I know there's a lot of local projects, or if you want to put in a multi-use path, there's going to be a lot of things you need to work with between the SHPO and the local historic preservation commissions on getting it approved. And knowing whether or not the property is National Register versus local listing is really helpful. But yeah, so if, as I mentioned, I was talking earlier, if a project is kind of adjacent or within a local historic district, we will rope in, we will CC the local preservation planner or the commission as appropriate. And we will provide that contact information for you to reach out to them. And do please forward our letter, because either we will have specific things to say or we will defer it to them for final approval for these projects. And then things can get a little complicated if there are effects, but we'll sort that out. We are happy to always help and consult, and we will do our best to kind of minimize any or resolve any adverse effects to these projects with local listings. And that's just some of the scary stuff. So disaster recovery. We are no stranger to disaster recovery, but Helene is a little unprecedented on its scope and scale. But overall, as Devin mentioned, we do prioritize an expedite review. When borrow pits were coming in, we were clearing those probably within 2 to 3 days tops. But overall, we tried to get review within a week to expedite the process for everybody. When recovery does happen, the number of reviews increases to about 1,000 to 2,000 projects. We have numbers from Helene in the next slide, but with Katie leaving, the only people on the survey side of things will be Renee and I, so be patient. But the disaster recovery can come from all places. It could be coming from FEMA directly. It could be from other federal funds going through other state agencies. But the type of emergency and the funding will vary, as well as how it's reviewed and who it goes through. But at the end of the day, if there's a historic property involved, it will get to us in some way, shape, or form. We do have a North Carolina disaster-specific PA with FEMA, and we've had one since 2020. And we pretty much update it with every new disaster, and currently we are hoping to execute the updated one to cover Helene in the next few months. We actually just had a meeting on it yesterday. But the new PA will also have language to allow other agencies, typically someone like DHUD, who also deals with kind of disaster funds, and they could kind of go through the more expedited review process. For example, CBGG, DR funds kind of can be streamlined if they, are part of this PA process. I'm imagining you guys have seen a lot of photos, but we are slowly but surely been trying to figure out the level of damage to historic properties. Jennifer, our restoration specialist out in West, has been a godsend and on the ground and visiting as many historic properties and documenting them as possible. That being said, as we get updates, we try to note that they are, if properties have been destroyed, we are updated on HPO web, and then they always consult us, so we could, line up with those points. But for example, the flowering bridge out in Lake Lear, that was no longer eligible due to the damage to Helene. But it's taking a lot of time because there's only so few of us, and overall, even though a lot of roads and stuff have been reopened, there's still a lot of extremely inaccessible locations for us to be, get feet on the ground and verify things. But overall, just from Helene alone, there have been 186 temporary debris and reduction sites. In general, we've been doing our best just to clear them because they are temporary. Some of them are, next to historic properties, but again, they're temporary. It shouldn't be an issue. It is a part of their contract to restore the place back to its original state. DOT has been working their butt offs. Of course, there's the I-40 news. They got clearing to take borrow from Forest Service land. Bridges has been inspected. Over 90% of the roads have been open. Several hundred bridges and culverts have been prepared. And luckily, thankfully for EAU and DOT, they're handling most of those projects out there, and they're working extremely hard. We did have a meeting with National Park Service. Only about 60% of their roads have been open, but that's still about 100 miles for them to repair. From their engineering point, there's a lot of surface damage, but when they do geotech, they're finding that some of the roads are damaged or eroding away 10, 20 feet down to the bedrock, and they kind of had to scarp out the whole thing and repave the whole thing. It's a total nightmare. And we are slowly but surely getting reporting back from them on what historic properties within their historic landmark boundary has been damaged. There are some that have been completely wiped out or washed out down in a river now. And slowly but surely, we've been reviewing a lot of FEMA projects. So far, there's been over 200 acquisitions and elevations. Most of them not historic properties, but some of them are. Again, we're reviewing them as fast as possible. I think some folks asked about Section 106 and Federal Highways Section 4F. They are separate processes, but they do merge at some point because Section 4F does consider historic sites. So Section 4F is under DOT's Acts of 1966. But basically, anything that receives funding or requires approval from DOT requires a Section 4F review. It is implemented by Federal Highways and the Federal Transit Authority. But the big things you need to know is that they look at two things. When they're reviewing kind of project designs, is there's no feasible and prudent alternative that avoids the Section 4 property and includes all possible plans to minimize harm. Feasible and prudent are defined. I do have a link, and we will disseminate that on how they define feasible and prudent, but when in doubt, talk to your federal highways contact and they can kind of clarify at that point. But if you do have a historic site, which is part of one of many historic properties, including parks, recreation areas, refuges, and then other considerations, they do need to consider those effects in the design process. Luckily, most major transportation projects are covered under our PA with federal highways, NCDOT, and Army Corps. But when it's not, and this is when it comes back to sidewalks, greenways, borrow pits, railroad grade, all that kind of stuff, anything that is FAA, FRA, everything else in the transportation alphabet soup, typically go through the normal Section 106 process or specifically the locally administered projects. So my position, as Renee noted, is funded specifically to review those kind of projects. So if you are dealing with that kind of local administered project or other smaller projects that are outside of the PA, you're talking to me, and I'm happy to help clarify this giant wall of text. So, but know that those are the things you need to consider, and we are happy to help walk you through it. DOT does have a specific guide on how to kind of initiate consultation with us and kind of stuff you need to consider. But overall, it does follow the same basic Section 106 ER review. You contact us, we screen the area, we tell you if you need to do a survey or not, if you need to do an updated evaluation or not. And if you provide enough plans, actual design plans, we could then actually send a letter back determining the actual effects. You know, we could say no effect. If it's a no comment, no effect, you're good to go. You don't need to talk to us anymore unless there are some sort of change of scope that is way different from the original scope or adds an APE, then you need to reinitiate consultation with us. But if you don't have enough information for us to review and we simply see that the study area goes over a historic property, we will say that there is a potential effect. And then you would then need to contact the DOT project manager, they'll contact Federal Highways, they will do a bunch of stuff with you guys, and eventually they'll come back to us and we'll start some sort of effects consultation, concurrence, or meeting, depending on the level of the scope of the project. Questions, concerns? I know it's a lot of information, but in summary, if you have any questions and we don't answer today, just email us and we're happy to answer anything.
I'm curious if you provide any specific guidance in regards to transmission lines. So a couple of states provide specific boundaries in certain areas over the transmission lines or height increase.
Transmission lines, transmission lines, it's you kind of treat them like cell towers. So if there are heights increase, be considerate of if it is in view shed of historic property. So you could just do a basic screening and kind of following the same guidelines of height on how far you need to look out. But overall, usually when the transmission line has already been is already there and already been cleared, there isn't much more Section 106 to be done. So if you are replacing in kind, generally you're fine. That being said, not all transmission lines have been surveyed before, but that's also why it's important just to initiate consultation with us. We'll screen it and we'll let you know if anything more needs to be done. But I think we've only had one project come up in the last 2 years that added a transmission line that was slightly too big, and then we asked for a little bit more work or like some sort of simulations. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other questions? All right. But yeah, just please email us. Email the environment review inbox, or you can email, well, preferably that, and then that could filter to the appropriate person to answer your questions. But usually there's also no issue if you email Renee or I directly to help, consult on anything. And there's also no issue with just trying to contact us a little bit directly in pre-consultation. If you really are confused about the ER process, we're happy to pre-consult with you and make sure that you do have all your ducks in a row. But in short, the checklist does have everything that you need or should include when submitting a project to us. If you do have more specific archaeological concerns, that'll be covered a little bit later in session 2. Guess that leaves us.
Also happy to take archaeology questions now if you have
we have
questions
time, yeah.
related to these topics.
Otherwise, I think it's a break time. 15-minute break? What time will be back, Katie? 15, I guess 10:15. Okay, we'll be back for session 2 at 10:15.